Finally have our first Commanders re-sign of the offseason, Anthony.
Finally, man.
Did you have money on Zane Gonzalez being the first guy back in?
No, I did not.
Trey Hendrickson's been given permission to seek a trade. And this is fairly stunning because there is nobody. And you know how Chris Berman used to always say, there's nobody that circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. There's nobody that denies a trade request like the Cincinnati Bengals. They ignored Jamar Chase. They ignored T. Higgins. They ignored Hendrickson last year. They've ignored plenty of other guys over the course, going back to like Carson Palmer back in the day. Took him like multiple years to finally get out of there. Like it is, they'll just put their heads down and keep trucking along. Oh, you want just rolling on down. But today, with the reality bearing down on them that they have chosen the most expensive paths for their two receivers, who their quarterback very much wants back, in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, they've decided that Trey Hendrickson is going to be the odd man out. And so Hendrickson is now available for trade. And I feel like every time someone like this becomes available, I should just put out a post that's like, yes, no, maybe. In terms of Commanders' interest, I think Keim did that at one point. He would just be like, no, maybe, yes, no. This is a maybe for me. Positionally, contractually, I'm okay with it. It just depends on the draft capital. You've given up your fifth for Debo. I don't want to give up. I don't want to do what the Bears are doing. Where the Bears, and maybe the Bears have a little bit more draft capital. I haven't looked at their stack of picks to know whether they actually are doing something dumb or not. But like the Bears have now given up a sixth and a fourth to get their guards, and they haven't made long-term commitments, at least to Tooney, who's just got 1 year remaining on his deal. You have to have some draft picks. You have to give yourself some runway, something we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. But if you're telling me I can do next year's fourth, like I don't mind the price theoretically of a fourth for Trey Hendrickson, right? I just don't want to give up this year's fourth and go from the middle of the third round where I have Miami's pick from the Jahan trade that circled through Philly to the sixth round without having a pick. So if you can tell me I can do next year's fourth for Trey Hendrickson and pay him $20-something million, low 20s million dollars for 2 years, considering he led the NFL in sacks last year, I'm not opposed to that. I also don't know that it's my number one priority, knowing that Khalil Mack is floating out there, as is Josh Sweat, as is Hassan Reddick. Like, there's enough guys that are intriguing out there that even though Trey Hendrickson might be a little better than those guys, and I really like the fit personality-wise, and I think he's a really, really talented football player who makes them better instantly, I don't know that's the best use of their resources to go get Trey Hendrickson. But it's not a no, that's for sure.
I like Trey, but at the same token, considering the deal that Max Crosby just got, I feel like he's going to want to command, some top of the market kind of money. And we have the infrastructure to support that, but at the same token, like, we still have a team to like build. And
if he wants $30 million, I'm sorry, I just can't do that for him. Like, he's not the run player that Myles Garrett is, or he's not young enough in Max Crosby's case that eventually he's going to be the fourth, fifth highest paid defensive guy by the time that deal ends, kind of thing. Like, there's no Trey Hendrickson on the wrong side of 30. And boy, does that phrase hurt to say now for me in my life as I sit here as a 35-year-old. But so I have empathy on that. Try not to say it crudely, but like, the reality is in the NFL, when you're on my side of 30, Anthony, it's not great for your ability to get big contracts, and especially long-term contracts. And so, again, if he wants low 20s and multi-year, I'm willing to do even a 3-year deal with basically no money guaranteed in the third year.
Yeah.
But 2 years of pretty guaranteed money. I'm willing to do that for the dude who led the NFL in sacks last season.
Yeah, for sure.
But high 20s, low 30s, and maybe it's worth it for a team like New England who just has money to burn, or another team. But I don't think for Washington I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
I'd rather take my flyer on like Hassan Reddick, who 2 years ago was insane. and then last year got stuck with the Jets in a contract dispute. And, I was joking with Logan on Take Command. I was like, Logan was like, I don't know, like he didn't play last year. That always worries me. And I'm like, honestly, sign of respect. If you got into the Jets building and looked around and went, this is bad, I'm not doing this, that shows me you're an intelligent person, because boy, were the Jets a dumpster fire last year. Other news today, Joey Bosa, this one actually went down last night. Joey Bosa released by the Chargers. He was a Pro Bowler last year. Like, Joey Bosa is still a good football player. I just don't know that he's someone that I want to invest any serious money in, because both he and his brother have had a bunch of injury stuff the last couple of years. And, I hate to be like, I'm going to use his brother against him, but like, it does tell me something about the durability of the genetics here. It's a data point that we don't have on most other players, but I think that the decline, he's up there in age, depending on what he wants. I'm not too keen on Joey Bosa. I am still, again, Hassan Reddick is very interesting to me because of the upside. Josh Sweat is interesting to me. Khalil Mack is exceptionally interesting to me on a one-year deal. And then obviously we'll see what they can do in the draft, because I do think that there's it's a decent edge class. There's not studs necessarily, but there are a bunch of guys that you're like, oh, that guy could be pretty good. And we'll see. But there's also guys like DeMarcus Lawrence out there. He's got the familiarity with DQ. So there's some level of depth to this edge class. I just don't know if the needle mover is necessarily there. And we'll see if someone, who becomes a needle mover winds up falling to them at 29. Feels unlikely, but stranger things have happened. Continuing on down the list of transactions, those are some of the goings. Some of the guys that are staying put, including in Washington. We finally have our first Commanders re-sign of the offseason, Anthony.
Finally, man.
Did you have money on Zane Gonzalez being the first guy back in?
No, I did not.
No, I didn't have money on anybody. But had I put up money on it, it wouldn't have been Zane Gonzalez. But they're going to bring back the kicker, who was their backup last year, and then Austin Seibert went sideways, and then they ultimately elevate Gonzalez. He has a couple big misses, but also a bunch of really big kicks, including in the playoffs. And here's the thing. I could see them drafting a kicker in the 7th round or bringing in a UDFA. Like, I would be stunned if he does not have a rookie to compete with him in training camp / in the offseason. But if Zane Gonzalez is your floor as a kicker, and I don't say knows your system, he's a kicker, but like, he knows your locker room, he knows your people, there's a lot worse you can do than Zane Gonzalez. So, congrats, Zane. Got anything else on the kicker, Anthony?
Glad he's back.
All right. And then last but not least, here as we dot around the NFL and get you the latest news, the Rams have re-signed Tutu Atwell, a 1-year, $10 million deal for their slot receiver, which I think is interesting because, like, he's kind of in the De'Ami Brown kind of league. I think Atwell's probably been a more productive player, but I think De'Ami at 25 years old with what he did in the playoffs, there's a lot of people around the league that are like, that dude might get a little bit of money. So I think $10 million is interesting. That's kind of starting to set the range for the receivers and some of this mid-tier type of guys. Atwell's young enough that he's kind of in De'Ami's class. So if you tell me De'Ami winds up with like 12, I'd tell you that probably sounds about right. I don't know whether he's going to get that here, but definitely wouldn't rule it out. So I think that's kind of where we are in the receiver market.
Yeah. If De'Ami was to get $12 million, are you bringing him back here? If that's what he wants. Or is that too much? Would you rather have a Darius Slayton? Because I feel like Darius Slayton, Tutu, De'Ami.
Here's what I would say. I don't know with what I know right now that would be not my number one use of the $12 million.
Okay, that's fair.
But if they do it, I'm not going to criticize them one bit. Because this is like, I've actually been talking about this with a lot of people recently. There's a lack of humility in these chairs, these microphones. I don't mean like when Chris sits down or Linnell sits down or Sheehan sits down specifically on this station. I mean, generally in analysis spaces where we are asked to give strong takes and be very definitive when the people who are the actual decision makers have just significantly more information. And if they watched Diami practice at the end of last year and went, that dude is where we want him. Mm-hmm. From a development standpoint, we think he can continue to grow. And even though he was a couple 100-yard receiver last year, he can be a 800-yard receiver next year if we put him in that number 2 spot. And we know how to use him, and we understand him now. It just took us a little bit of time. And they think he's worth $12 million. I will not bat an eye at them with their player in their building, especially for a guy they didn't draft and that they are making a pure assessment on. So I have the humility to say Adam Peters, whatever you say on Diami Brown, is correct. Is that where I think they'll go at $12 million? No. Would I probably rather have Slayton at 8 or 10 than Diami at 12? I think so. But for a 25-year-old dude who runs like a 4.41 or whatever he ran, like, he's a super valuable player. I get it. So I'm not anti that. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, a little bit more on free agency before Linnell hops in here at 4:30 on the Team 980.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.